In a gleaming Seattle corporate office, a pregnant woman was about to deliver the presentation of her career. What started as a routine morning meeting took a shocking turn when she came face to face with systematic discrimination disguised as business policy. Emily Harper wasn't your typical account manager. For 5 years, she had climbed the corporate ladder through strategic brilliance that saved clients millions. When HR told her that pregnancy would hurt team morale, she had no idea this was the beginning of a legal battle that would destroy her company's $12 million contract and expose years of systematic bias against working mothers. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Emily Harper stared at the thin pink line materializing on the pregnancy test, her heart hammering against her ribs as the Seattle morning light filtered through the narrow window of her office bathroom. She'd ducked in here 15 minutes before the most important presentation of her career, driven by a queasy uncertainty that had been gnawing at her for days. Now, holding this small plastic harbinger of everything she'd hoped for but never quite planned, she felt the ground shift beneath her carefully constructed world. Pregnant. The word echoed in her mind as she slipped the test into her purse, her hands trembling slightly. In 3 hours, she would be sitting across from Morrison Industries' executive team, delivering the pitch that would secure not just a $12 million contract, but her promotion to senior partner. 5 years of 80-hour weeks, missed dinners, and strategic networking had led to this moment. And now, this beautiful complication. She splashed cold water on her face, studying her reflection in the mirror. At 32, Emily had worked methodically toward this pinnacle. The Ohio farm girl who'd clawed her way through state school on scholarships and landed in Seattle's competitive consulting world through sheer determination. Her auburn hair was pulled back in the severe bun that had become her armor, her gray suit tailored to project competence and authority. Nothing in her appearance betrayed the seismic shift occurring beneath the surface. The nausea that had driven her to take the test rolled through her again, and she pressed her palm against her still flat stomach. "Hello, little one," she thought, surprised by the immediate tenderness that bloomed in her chest. She'd always wanted children, someday. But someday had arrived with the subtlety of a freight train on the morning she needed to be at her absolute best. Emily returned to her office, where her presentation materials lay spread across the mahogany desk like battle plans. Charts tracking Morrison Industries' operational inefficiencies, cost-benefit analyses, implementation timelines, 6 months of meticulous preparation reduced to 47 slides that would determine her future. She'd rehearsed this presentation so many times she could deliver it in her sleep, but now each data point seemed to shimmer with new significance. If she landed this contract and made partner, she'd have the financial security and professional standing to take maternity leave without jeopardizing her career. If she failed. Her phone buzzed. A text from Michael. "Good luck today, love. You're going to kill it. Dinner at Canlis to celebrate?" Michael Thompson, her anchor in this storm of ambition. They'd been together for 4 years, colleagues first, in the same building's tech division, then partners in the careful dance of office romance that had bloomed into something deeper. Last month, he'd proposed over takeout Chinese food and Netflix. The ring presented in a fortune cookie he'd somehow convinced the restaurant to doctor. It had been perfectly them, unpretentious, sweet, and slightly ridiculous. She'd said yes, immediately swept up in the rightness of it all. Now she was carrying his child. The morning flew by in a blur of final preparations and pre-meeting jitters. Emily arrived at Morrison Industries' downtown offices 30 minutes early, using the time to review her materials one last time in the marble lobby. The building was a testament to old Seattle money, timber baron wealth transformed into steel and glass, with a view of Elliott Bay that spoke of power and permanence. Catherine Walsh met her in the elevator, extending a firm handshake that Emily remembered from their initial consultation 6 months ago. At 45, Catherine commanded attention without demanding it. Silver-streaked hair, intelligent eyes, and the kind of quiet confidence that came from decades of being the only woman in countless boardrooms. "Emily, good to see you again," Catherine said as they rode to the 23rd floor. "I've been looking forward to this presentation. The preliminary work your team did was impressive." "Thank you. I think you'll be pleased with what we've developed." Emily's voice was steady, professional, betraying none of the chaos in her personal life. This was what she did best: compartmentalization, focus, the ability to channel everything into the task at hand. The conference room was already filled when they entered. 8 executives around a gleaming table, tablets and coffee cups at the ready. Emily recognized most of them from preliminary meetings, but their collective attention felt different now. More intense, more final. This wasn't exploratory anymore. This was judgment. For the next hour, Emily was in her element. She moved through the presentation with the fluid confidence of someone who knew her material inside and out, fielding questions with precision, addressing concerns before they could fully form. She watched Catherine's subtle nods of approval, caught the meaningful glances exchanged between executives when she unveiled their cost-saving projections. "The implementation timeline is aggressive but achievable," Emily concluded, advancing to her final slide. "Our phased approach minimizes disruption while maximizing efficiency gains. Conservatively, you're looking at a 15% improvement in operational costs within the first year, with compound improvements thereafter." The questions that followed were probing but not hostile, the kind of due diligence that signaled serious interest rather than skepticism. Emily answered each one with the thoroughness that had become her trademark, drawing on case studies and industry benchmarks to support every recommendation. When Catherine finally called for a break, the room's energy was electric with possibility. "This is exactly the kind of strategic thinking we've been looking for," she told Emily privately as the other executives filed out. "Pending board approval, I think we can move forward with implementation as early as next quarter." Emily felt a surge of triumph so pure it was almost dizzying. She'd done it. The contract was as good as signed, her partnership as good as guaranteed. As she packed up her materials, she imagined calling her mother with the news, seeing Michael's face when she told him, planning the celebration dinner where she'd share not just one piece of life-changing news, but 2. The ride back to the office passed in a haze of satisfaction and planning. Emily's phone buzzed with congratulatory texts from colleagues who'd helped with the presentation prep, but she saved returning them for later. Right now, she wanted to savor this moment, the culmination of everything she'd worked toward, the foundation for everything she hoped to build. Michael was waiting in her office when she returned, his dark hair slightly mussed from running his hands through it, his tell when he was nervous. At 6'2", he usually projected an easy confidence, but today he looked like he'd been pacing. "How did it go?" he asked, rising from the chair where he'd been pretending to review code on his laptop. "We got it," Emily said, unable to keep the grin from spreading across her face. "Catherine Walsh practically told me the contract is ours." Michael's face lit up as he crossed to her, lifting her off her feet in a bear hug that made her laugh. "I knew it. I absolutely knew it. You've been working toward this for years, Em. You deserve this." When he set her down, Emily found herself studying his face, the strong jaw, the laugh lines around his green eyes, the scar through his left eyebrow from a childhood accident. This man who'd supported her ambitions even when they meant missed dinners and weekend work sessions. This man who'd waited patiently for her to be ready for their future. "Michael," she began, her voice suddenly softer. "There's something else." Something in her tone made him still, his expression shifting to concern. "What is it? Are you okay?" Emily reached into her purse, her fingers closing around the pregnancy test she'd carried with her all day like a talisman. She pulled it out slowly, watching his face as understanding dawned. "We're pregnant," she whispered. The silence stretched between them for heartbeats. Then Michael's face transformed, surprise melting into wonder, wonder into joy so pure it made Emily's chest tight with emotion. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "Really?" he breathed. "We're really—" "Really," she confirmed, laughing through her tears. "I took the test this morning, right before the presentation. Talk about timing." "The best timing," Michael said fiercely, kissing her forehead. Her cheeks, finally her lips. "God, Em, this is incredible. This is everything." They held each other in the glow of late afternoon sunlight streaming through her office windows. The city of Seattle spread out below them like a promise. Emily had never felt more complete, more aligned with the trajectory of her life. The professional triumph and personal joy seemed to amplify each other, creating a sense of rightness so profound it felt like destiny. That evening, they called Emily's mother from their Capitol Hill apartment, putting Dorothy Harper on speaker as they shared their twin announcements. Dorothy's delighted laughter echoed through the room, followed immediately by practical questions about Emily's health, her work schedule, her plans for balancing career and motherhood. "I won't lie to you, sweetheart," Dorothy said, her teacher's voice carrying the weight of experience. "It's not going to be easy. When I was pregnant with you, I had parents calling me incompetent, administrators questioning my commitment. But times have changed. Your generation has protections we never had." Emily curled against Michael on their couch, his arm around her shoulders as she cradled the phone. "I know, Mom. I've been thinking about it all day. But this company values results, and I've proven myself. This partnership is going to give us the security and flexibility we need." "Just be careful who you trust," Dorothy cautioned gently. "Not everyone will see your pregnancy as the blessing it is. Some people still see pregnant women as liabilities rather than the capable professionals they've always been." Later, as Emily lay in bed listening to Michael's steady breathing beside her, she replayed her mother's words. She understood the concern. She'd heard the stories, read the statistics about pregnancy discrimination. But she'd also spent 5 years building relationships, proving her worth, establishing herself as indispensable. Her track record spoke for itself. Her pregnancy didn't change her competence or her commitment. Tomorrow, she decided, she would inform HR about her condition. It was the responsible thing to do, the professional approach. She'd work with them to plan her maternity leave, ensuring a smooth transition that protected both her clients and her position. Everything would be handled properly, transparently, with the same attention to detail she brought to every aspect of her career. Emily drifted off to sleep with her hand resting on her stomach. Dreams filled with corner offices and baby cribs, partnership announcements and nursery decorations. She'd built her life on the belief that hard work and integrity were rewarded. That excellence provided protection against the arbitrary cruelties of the world. She had no way of knowing that by the end of the week, those beliefs would be tested in ways she never imagined possible. 2 days after her triumphant presentation, Emily stood outside Richard Blackwood's office at precisely 2 p.m., her hand poised to knock on the heavy oak door. She'd spent the morning rehearsing this conversation, crafting what she believed would be a straightforward discussion about maternity leave policies and transition planning. Her leather portfolio contained copies of relevant HR policies she'd downloaded, a preliminary timeline for her pregnancy, and notes about client handover procedures. Everything organized, everything professional. The nameplate on the door read, "Richard Blackwood, Director of Human Resources," in imposing brass letters. Emily had interacted with him only occasionally during her 5 years at the firm. Perfunctory exchanges during company meetings, brief encounters in the elevator. He was a fixture of the corporate landscape, a man whose 20-year tenure had made him seem as permanent as the building's foundation. Policy. and I'm entitled to job-protected leave under both federal and state law. I thought we could discuss timing and transition planning." Blackwood removed his glasses and cleaned them with deliberate slowness, still saying nothing. When he finally spoke, his tone had shifted subtly, less neutral, more pointed. "Emily, you understand that your position requires significant travel, don't you? The Morrison Industries account alone will demand frequent trips to their facilities across the region, client dinners, weekend strategy sessions, last-minute presentations. How exactly do you propose to fulfill these obligations in your condition?" The word condition hit Emily like a slap. Not pregnancy, not even situation, but condition, as if she'd contracted something contagious. "I'm perfectly capable of traveling during pregnancy," she said, her voice tightening slightly. "Millions of women work throughout their pregnancies, without any impact on their professional performance. My doctor hasn't placed any restrictions on my activities." "Yet," Blackwood interjected. "She hasn't placed restrictions yet. But what happens when she does? What happens when you're too uncomfortable to attend that crucial client meeting? When morning sickness prevents you from making that important presentation? When your fellow team members have to pick up your slack?" Emily felt heat rising in her cheeks. "With respect, Mr. Blackwood, I've never missed a client meeting or failed to deliver on a commitment in 5 years with this company. My pregnancy doesn't change my work ethic or capabilities." Blackwood leaned forward, his elbows on the desk, his eyes never leaving her face. "Doesn't it? Because I'm concerned about team morale, Emily. Your colleagues have been working just as hard as you have, putting in the same long hours, making the same sacrifices. How do you think they'll feel when they have to cover for your limitations? When they're staying late because you can't travel or need to leave early for doctor's appointments?" She knocked twice, hearing his gruff, "Come in," from behind the door. Blackwood's office was designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined 2 walls, filled with legal tomes and corporate policy manuals that seemed to loom over visitors, like silent sentinels. Awards and certificates covered a 3rd wall, recognition for HR excellence, corporate leadership accolades, photos of Blackwood shaking hands with various executives. Behind his mahogany desk, Seattle's skyline stretched, out through floor-to-ceiling windows, but the blinds were angled to cast the room in perpetual shadow. "Emily," Blackwood said without looking up from his computer screen. At 58, he cut an imposing figure even while seated, broad shoulders straining against his navy suit, silver hair combed back in severe lines, reading glasses perched on a nose that looked like it had been broken and reset more than once. "Sit." Emily settled into one of the leather chairs facing his desk, noting how they were positioned slightly lower than his executive chair. Everything in this room spoke to hierarchy, to power dynamics carefully constructed and maintained. "Thank you for seeing me on short notice," Emily began, her voice steady and professional. "I wanted to discuss some upcoming changes that will affect my work schedule and begin planning accordingly." Blackwood finally looked up, his pale blue eyes fixing on her with the intensity of a prosecutor sizing up a defendant. "Changes?" His voice carried a slight southern drawl that decades in Seattle hadn't quite erased. "I'm pregnant," Emily said simply, maintaining eye contact. "I'm about 8 weeks along, due in early spring. I wanted to inform you as early as possible so we can work together to plan my maternity leave and ensure a smooth transition for my clients." The silence that followed stretched uncomfortably long. Blackwood leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled before him, studying Emily as if she'd just confessed to embezzling company funds. She could hear the muffled sounds of office life beyond his door, keyboards clicking, phones ringing, the distant hum of conversation. But inside this room, the air felt thick and oppressive. "I see," he said finally. "And when exactly were you planning to take time off?" The way he said take time off made it sound like she was requesting vacation to go backpacking through Europe rather than exercising a fundamental legal. Right. Emily felt the first flicker of unease but pushed it aside. The standard 12 weeks of family leave, she replied. I've reviewed the company. I haven't asked anyone to cover for anything. Not yet, he interrupted again. But you will. Pregnant women always do. It's biology, Emily, not bias. Your priorities are going to shift, whether you admit it now or not. Your focus will be divided. And frankly, I'm not sure our clients will have confidence in someone whose attention is elsewhere. The room seemed to shrink around Emily as the full scope of what was happening became clear. This wasn't a planning conversation. This was an interrogation, a systematic dismantling of her position disguised as concern for company welfare. Mr. Blackwood, she said, her voice carefully controlled. What you're describing sounds dangerously close to pregnancy discrimination, which is illegal under federal and state law. My personal circumstances don't affect my professional competence, and any suggestion otherwise? I'm not suggesting anything. Blackwood cut her off, his voice rising slightly. I'm stating facts about the realities of your situation. Facts that affect this company's ability to serve our clients effectively. Facts that affect team dynamics and workplace efficiency. Just then, Emily caught a glimpse of movement in her peripheral vision. Through the glass partition that separated Blackwood's office from the outer HR area, she could see Lisa Thompson, the young HR associate who'd started just months after Emily's own arrival at the firm. Lisa was pretending to organize files, but her attention was clearly focused on the raised voices coming from Blackwood's office. Their eyes met briefly through the glass, and Emily saw something in Lisa's expression: discomfort, maybe even recognition of what was unfolding. I think we need to schedule a follow-up meeting, Blackwood said, his tone suddenly formal and bureaucratic. I'll need to discuss your situation with Jennifer Martinez and get her input on how to proceed. Obviously, this affects company planning and resource allocation in ways that require executive-level consideration. Emily's portfolio sat unopened in her lap, all her careful preparation rendered useless by the hostile turn this conversation had taken. When would you like to schedule that meeting? Tomorrow, 2 o'clock? And Emily? Blackwood replaced his glasses and returned his attention to his computer screen, dismissing her without looking up. I'd suggest you give some serious thought to what's really in the best interests of your career and this company. Timing matters in business, and your timing. Well, it leaves something to be desired. Emily stood on unsteady legs, her professional composure intact, but her world fundamentally altered. The man behind the desk had just reduced her pregnancy to a business liability, her future motherhood to a scheduling inconvenience. Every instinct told her to fight back immediately, to cite legal protections and demand respect. But another part of her, the strategic part that had gotten her this far, recognized that she was outgunned in this particular battle. I'll see you tomorrow at 2, she managed, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. As she reached for the door handle, Blackwood's voice stopped her. Oh, and Emily? I'd keep this conversation confidential for now. No need to worry the team unnecessarily while we sort out the details. Emily nodded without turning around and stepped into the outer office. Lisa Thompson looked up from her files, their eyes meeting again. This time, Lisa's expression was unmistakably sympathetic, tinged with what looked like guilt. Walking back to her own office, Emily felt as though she were moving through water, each step requiring tremendous effort. The hallways that had felt like her domain just hours ago now seemed foreign, potentially hostile. Colleagues who passed her in the corridor looked the same, smiled the same professional smiles, but Emily found herself wondering what they really thought, what they'd been told, what whispered conversations might already be taking place. The carefully constructed foundation of her career, built on merit and achievement, and the naive belief that excellence provided protection, had just revealed its first cracks. and Emily was beginning to understand that the storm she'd weathered so far had been nothing more than a gentle breeze compared to what was coming. The executive conference room on the 15th floor had been the site of Emily's greatest triumphs. Contract signings, promotion announcements, strategy sessions where her insights had shaped the company's direction. Now, as she settled into the same ergonomic chair where she'd celebrated countless victories, the mahogany table felt less like a platform for success and more like a tribunal bench. Jennifer Martinez entered at precisely 2:00 p.m., her heels clicking against the polished concrete floor with the measured cadence of someone who'd learned to command attention through presence alone. At 42, the CEO carried herself with the careful authority of a woman who'd clawed her way to the top of a male-dominated industry. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe chignon, her charcoal suit impeccably tailored, every detail calculated to project competence and control. "Emily," Jennifer said with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes, "thank you for your flexibility with the timing. I know how busy you've been with the Morrison Industries implementation planning." Richard Blackwood followed close behind, carrying a manila folder thick with documents. He positioned himself strategically at the head of the table, forcing Emily to crane her neck slightly to maintain eye contact. Another subtle power play in what was becoming an elaborate psychological chess match. "I understand Richard has briefed you on some concerns that have come to our attention," Jennifer continued, settling into her chair with fluid grace. "We wanted to discuss them with you directly before making any decisions about moving forward." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. "Moving forward with what exactly?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Jennifer exchanged a meaningful glance with Blackwood before answering. "Emily, let me start by saying that your work here has been exemplary. The Morrison Industries pitch was brilliant, exactly the kind of strategic thinking that makes this company competitive. Your dedication and professionalism have never been in question." The butt hung in the air like a sword waiting to fall. "However," Jennifer continued, "we have to consider the broader implications of recent developments. The realities of client service, team dynamics, and operational continuity." Emily's hands tightened on the arms of her chair. "You're talking about my pregnancy." "We're talking about business realities," Blackwood interjected, opening his folder and spreading documents across the table like evidence at a trial. "The Morrison contract requires intensive client management over the next 18 months. Weekly on-site visits, quarterly reviews, emergency response capabilities. These aren't suggestions, Emily. They're contractual obligations." Jennifer leaned forward, her expression carefully neutral. "We've reviewed your expected timeline, and frankly, we're concerned about continuity. Our clients invest in relationships, in trust. They need to know their account manager will be available when they need them." "I'll be available," Emily said, her voice steady despite the growing knot in her stomach. "Pregnancy doesn't make me incompetent or unreliable. I've never missed a client commitment in 5 years." "Not yet," Blackwood said. "But pregnancy changes things, Emily. Doctor's appointments, fatigue, health complications. These aren't theoretical concerns. They're statistical probabilities that affect our ability to serve clients effectively." Emily felt the ground shifting. Beneath her, the careful logic she'd prepared crumbling in the face of their coordinated assault. "What exactly are you proposing?" Jennifer's pause was calculated, rehearsed. "We think it would be best for everyone if we restructured your role, moved you to a more suitable position while you navigate this transition." "Restructured how?" Blackwood slid a document across the table. "We're proposing to move you to our strategic planning division. Excellent work, very important to the company's future, but more suited to your current circumstances. Regular hours, minimal travel, reduced client interaction." Emily scanned the job description, her heart sinking with each line. It was a demotion dressed up in corporate euphemisms, a lateral move to nowhere that would effectively end her partnership track. The salary was 60% of her current compensation, the responsibilities a fraction of what she'd built over 5 years. "This is constructive dismissal," she said quietly. "You're forcing me out of my position because I'm pregnant." "We're offering you an alternative that accommodates your changing needs," Jennifer corrected, her tone remaining maddeningly reasonable. "Many women find reduced responsibilities helpful during pregnancy. I haven't asked for reduced responsibilities." "But you will," Blackwood said with absolute certainty. "They always do. And when that happens, your team has to pick up the slack. Your clients suffer. The company's reputation takes a hit." Emily looked around the conference room, noting the irony of the motivational posters lining the walls. Excellence, innovation, integrity. The company's stated values mocked her from their expensive frames. "Where's Brian in all this?" she asked. "He's my direct supervisor. Shouldn't he be part of this conversation?" Another glance passed between Jennifer and Blackwood. "Brian's on a call with the West Coast team," Jennifer said smoothly, "but he's been consulted and agrees this is the best path forward." The betrayal hit Emily like a physical blow. Brian Taylor, who'd praised her work just last week, who'd promised to support her partnership bid, had apparently abandoned her without even the courtesy of facing her directly. "I need to think about this," Emily said, gathering the papers, with hands that shook slightly. "Of course," Jennifer said, rising from her chair. "But Emily, I want you to understand. This offer represents our genuine desire to find a solution that works for everyone. If you're not interested in the strategic planning role, well, we'll have to consider other options." The threat was delicately delivered, but unmistakable. "Accept the demotion or face termination. How long do I have to decide?" "End of the week?" Blackwood said, closing his folder with finality. "The Morrison Industries contract begins active implementation Monday. We need someone who can commit fully to the demands of the position." Emily stood slowly, her legs unsteady beneath her. The room that had once felt like her domain now seemed foreign, hostile. The panoramic view of Seattle's skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows looked different too, less like a symbol of possibility and more like a reminder of how far she had to fall. "There's one more thing," Jennifer said as Emily reached the door. "We'd appreciate your discretion about this conversation. Personnel matters should remain confidential while we sort out the details." Emily nodded without turning around, understanding perfectly. They wanted to control the narrative, to frame her departure as voluntary rather than discriminatory. As she walked back to her office, Emily passed colleagues who smiled and waved, oblivious to the seismic shift that had just occurred. The hallways felt surreal, like a movie set where she was the only one who knew the script had changed. Her office phone was blinking with messages, probably Catherine Walsh calling about implementation details, clients wanting updates, vendors seeking approvals. All the professional relationships she'd cultivated, all the projects she'd shepherded, suddenly felt precarious and temporary. Emily sank into her desk chair and stared out at the city below. In the span of 48 hours, she'd gone from rising star to corporate liability. Her pregnancy, the joy she'd shared with Michael just days before, had been weaponized against her, transformed from blessing to business risk. She thought about her mother's warnings, her gentle cautions. About workplace discrimination, Dorothy had been right, but even she couldn't have predicted how sophisticated the attack would be, how it would be wrapped in concern for Emily's well-being and disguised as business necessity. The worst part wasn't the demotion or the pay cut, or even the destruction of her partnership dreams. The worst part was the surgical precision with which they'd dismantled her position while maintaining plausible deniability. Every argument they'd made could be defended as legitimate business concern. Every offer they'd presented could be framed as accommodation rather than discrimination. Emily opened her laptop and began typing an email to Michael, then deleted it. How could she explain that everything they'd celebrated, everything they'd planned, had evaporated in the space of a single meeting? How could she tell him that their joy had become her professional death sentence? Instead, she opened a new browser window and searched for employment lawyers in Seattle. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind. Just be careful who you trust. Emily was beginning to understand that in this fight, she could trust no one except herself. The corporate world she'd believed in, the meritocracy she'd counted on, had revealed itself to be an illusion. Excellence and integrity weren't armor against discrimination. They were just convenient fiction to maintain while the real business of exclusion continued behind closed doors. But if they thought she would accept their restructuring quietly, if they thought she would disappear into strategic planning and grateful silence, they had seriously underestimated Emily Harper. The fight was just beginning. Emily's new reality crystallized over the following days like ice forming on a window. Slowly at first, then with devastating clarity. Her access to the Morrison Industries client portal had been quietly revoked. Her name disappeared from the weekly strategy meetings. Colleagues who used to seek her input on projects now avoided eye contact in the hallways, their discomfort palpable as word of her transition spread through the office grapevine. By Thursday morning, she found herself relegated to a cramped interior office with no windows, reviewing outdated market research reports that felt more like busy work than strategic planning. The symbolism wasn't lost on her. She'd been moved. From the light into the shadows, from the center of action to the periphery of irrelevance. The law offices of Anderson and Associates occupied the 20th floor of a glass tower in downtown Seattle, its reception area decorated with the understated elegance that suggested competence without ostentation. Emily had spent 2 sleepless nights researching employment attorneys before settling on Robert Anderson, a recent law school graduate whose online reviews praised his passion for workers' rights and his willingness to take on David versus Goliath cases. At 28, Robert Anderson looked younger than his years. His sandy brown hair slightly mussed as if he'd been running his hands through it, his navy suit well-tailored but not expensive. He greeted Emily with a firm handshake and an intensity that reminded her of herself at that age, hungry, determined, and perhaps a little naive about the world's capacity for cruelty. "Ms. Harper," he said, gesturing toward a chair across from his modest desk. "Thank you for coming in. I've reviewed the information you provided over the phone, and I have to say, what you're describing sounds like textbook pregnancy discrimination." Emily settled into the chair, pulling out a manila folder thick with documentation she'd been compiling since Tuesday's meeting. "I've tried to document everything. Emails, meeting notes, the timeline of when my access to systems was revoked. I want to make sure we have a strong foundation if we decide to move forward." Robert's eyes lit up as he flipped through her materials. "This is excellent work. Most clients come in with scattered recollections and hurt feelings. You've built a paper trail that tells a clear story." He paused at a printout of an email. "This message from your manager about restructuring for operational efficiency, when was this sent?" "The day after my meeting with Jennifer Martinez. Brian Taylor, my direct supervisor, sent it to the entire team without warning me first. I found out about my demotion the same way everyone else did, through a company-wide announcement. And you have documentation showing your exemplary performance reviews, your client satisfaction ratings, your role in securing the Morrison Industries contract?" Emily nodded, producing another set of documents. 5 years of performance, evaluations, all exceeding expectations. Client testimonials, revenue figures for accounts I've managed, the presentation materials from Morrison Industries that they called brilliant, just days before they decided I wasn't suitable for the role. Robert leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "The challenge we'll face is that they've been careful to frame this as business necessity rather than discrimination. They're not saying you can't do the job because you're pregnant. They're saying the job requirements are incompatible with pregnancy. But that's the same thing, isn't it?" "Legally, yes. The Pregnancy Discrimination Act is clear. You can't be treated differently because of pregnancy, period. The problem is proving discriminatory intent when they've wrapped their actions in seemingly legitimate business concerns. Emily felt a familiar surge of frustration. So they can discriminate as long as they're sophisticated about it? They can try, Robert said with a slight smile. But discrimination leaves traces, even when people think they're being clever about it. The key is finding those traces and building a pattern that courts can recognize. As if summoned by their conversation, Emily's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it, then froze. It's from Lisa Thompson. She's the junior HR associate who was present during some of my interactions with Blackwood. She wants to meet. Robert leaned forward. What does she say? Emily read aloud. Can we talk? Not at the office. I have information that might help you. Starbucks on Pine Street, 6 p.m.? That's promising, Robert said. Whistleblowers often provide the missing pieces that transform a difficult case into a winnable one. But we need to be careful about how we handle this. Meanwhile, across town in the tech division of Emily's company, Michael Thompson was conducting his own investigation. His position as a senior developer gave him access to email servers and system logs that most employees never saw. What he'd discovered over the past 3 days had filled him with a cold fury that he was struggling to contain. Sitting in his cubicle, surrounded by the familiar hum of servers and the soft clicking of keyboards, Michael scrolled through archived emails with the methodical precision that made him excellent at debugging code. He'd been careful to stay within the bounds of his legitimate system access, but those bounds included backup servers where deleted emails were stored for data recovery purposes. The pattern was clear once you knew where to look. Within hours of Emily's pregnancy announcement to HR, a flurry of emails had circulated between Richard Blackwood, Jennifer Martinez, and several department heads. The language was careful, coded, in corporate euphemisms, but the intent was unmistakable. Blackwood to Martinez. The Harper situation requires immediate attention. Client confidence issues, team disruption potential, operational continuity concerns all factor into our response timeline. Martinez to Blackwood. Agree we need to move quickly. Legal reviewed our options. What's the exposure if we restructure her role immediately? Department Head Brian Taylor to Martinez. While Emily's work has been exemplary, I share concerns about the Morrison Industries account requiring consistent leadership through implementation phase. Michael printed each email, his jaw tightening. With every page. The betrayal by Brian Taylor was particularly galling. Emily had considered him a mentor, had trusted him to advocate for her advancement. Instead, he'd participated in her professional execution while lacking the courage to tell her directly. The most damning email came from Blackwood to the company's legal counsel. Need guidance on pregnancy accommodation requirements. Employee. In question currently manages high-profile account requiring extensive travel. Client interface. How do we protect company interests while avoiding discrimination claims? Michael's hands shook slightly as he added this email to his growing pile of evidence. They'd been planning Emily's removal before she'd even finished announcing her pregnancy. The whole charade about business necessity and client concerns had been orchestrated from the beginning. That evening, Emily sat across from Lisa Thompson. In a corner booth at Starbucks, the young woman's nervousness evident in how she kept glancing toward the entrance as if expecting company security to burst through the doors. I shouldn't be here, Lisa said quietly, her hands wrapped around a coffee cup she hadn't touched. But I can't sleep at night knowing what they're doing to you. What have you seen? Emily asked gently. Lisa pulled out her phone, then thought better of it, and put it away. I was there when Mr. Blackwood called legal about your situation. I heard him ask specifically about ways to remove you from client-facing roles without triggering discrimination protections. He used words like creative restructuring and alternative positioning. Emily felt her heart racing. Did he mention the Morrison Industries account specifically? He said your pregnancy made you a liability for high-stakes client relationships. That pregnant women were inherently unreliable, and that clients wouldn't respect someone who wasn't fully committed to their business. Are you willing to testify to that? Lisa's face went pale. I don't know. If they find out I'm talking to you, I'll lose my job. I just graduated from college. I have student loans, no savings. I can't afford to be blacklisted from the industry. Emily reached across the table and covered Lisa's hand with her own. I understand. But Lisa, if they can do this to me, they can do it to you someday. To any woman who works there. Sometimes the only way to stop bullies is to stand up to them. Let me think about it, Lisa whispered. I need more time. As Emily drove home through Seattle's evening traffic, her phone rang. Michael's voice filled the car through the Bluetooth speakers, tight with controlled anger. Em, I need to show you something when you get home. I've been digging through our email systems, and what I found? It's going to change everything. Emily gripped the steering wheel tighter. What did you find? Proof that they planned this from the beginning. Email chains, legal consultations, coordination between departments. They didn't decide to discriminate against you after considering your pregnancy. They decided to discriminate against you the moment they learned about it. For the first time since this nightmare began, Emily felt a spark of genuine hope. The evidence was mounting, the pattern becoming undeniable. They'd been careful, but not careful enough. And now she had allies. Robert Anderson with his legal expertise, potentially Lisa Thompson with her insider knowledge, and Michael with his technical skills and access to digital evidence. The storm that had been gathering around Emily's career was about to break in ways her employers never anticipated. They'd underestimated her resolve, her resources, and her refusal to disappear quietly into corporate obscurity. The fight was just beginning, but for the first time, Emily felt like she might actually have the weapons to win it. The small coffee shop on Capitol Hill felt worlds away from the sterile corporate environment where Emily's career was disintegrating. She'd chosen it deliberately, far from downtown, tucked between a vintage bookstore and a yoga studio, the kind of place where 3 professional-looking people could meet without attracting attention from her company's extensive network. Lisa Thompson arrived first, clutching a worn messenger bag and glancing nervously over her shoulder. At 24, she still carried the earnest idealism of someone who'd entered the workforce believing that merit and fairness would guide her path. The past week had shattered those illusions with brutal efficiency. I almost didn't come, Lisa admitted as Emily approached her corner table. I've been having nightmares about losing my job, about being blacklisted. But then I remembered what you said about stopping bullies. Emily squeezed Lisa's hand reassuringly. Whatever you're comfortable sharing, we appreciate. You don't have to do anything that puts you at risk. Robert Anderson arrived precisely on time, carrying a leather briefcase that looked like it had seen better days and a digital recorder that he placed carefully on the table between them. Ms. Thompson, thank you for agreeing to meet with us. Before we begin, I want you to understand that anything you tell us today is confidential unless you specifically consent to its use in legal proceedings. Lisa nodded, then pulled a manila envelope from her bag with trembling hands. I made copies, she said quietly. I know I shouldn't have, but I couldn't just stand by and watch what they're doing to Emily. The first document she slid across. The table was an email thread between Richard Blackwood and the company's legal counsel, dated just hours after Emily's pregnancy announcement. Robert's eyebrows rose as he read the subject line. Urgent. Pregnancy accommodation mitigation strategies. This is from Blackwood to our external law firm, Lisa explained, her voice gaining strength as she continued. He's asking for advice on how to remove Emily from client-facing roles without triggering federal protection laws. Emily read over Robert's shoulder, her anger building with each line. The email laid out Blackwood's strategy with clinical precision. Employee in question currently manages high-value account requiring extensive travel and client interface. Need guidance on restructuring role to minimize company liability while avoiding discrimination claims. Time-sensitive due to client contract implementation schedule. The response from the law firm was equally damning. Recommend immediate documentation of role requirements that pregnant employee cannot fulfill. Frame as business necessity rather than accommodation issue. Suggest alternative position with reduced responsibilities to demonstrate good faith effort. They had this planned before I even finished announcing my pregnancy, Emily said, her voice tight with controlled fury. Lisa nodded, pulling out another document. It gets worse. This is from a meeting I wasn't supposed to attend, but I was. Filing paperwork in the conference room when they started talking. The handwritten notes were in Lisa's careful script, documenting a conversation between Blackwood, Jennifer Martinez, and Brian Taylor. The quotes were devastating in their casual cruelty. Blackwood: pregnant women are inherently unreliable. Clients won't take her seriously once she starts showing. Martinez: what about the partnership track? We can't promote someone who'll be out for months at a time. Brian Taylor: Emily's work has been excellent, but we need consistency for Morrison Industries. Maybe this is an opportunity to restructure the entire team. Robert leaned back, in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. This is extraordinary, Lisa. Direct quotes showing discriminatory intent, documented coordination between departments, evidence that they plan to derail Emily's career based solely on her pregnancy status. There's more, Lisa said, her confidence growing. I've been keeping notes on everything I've observed since I started working there. Emily isn't the first pregnant employee they've pushed out. She opened a composition notebook filled with meticulous documentation spanning 18 months. Sarah Chen from accounting, forced into part-time status after announcing her pregnancy, then laid off during a reorganization 6 months later. Amanda Rodriguez from marketing, passed over for promotion twice after having her first child, then given a negative performance review for the first time in her career. Emily felt a chill run down her spine. I remember Sarah. She was brilliant with financial modeling. I always wondered why she suddenly went part-time. Because Blackwood told her that full-time work wasn't compatible with her new priorities, Lisa said bitterly. He used almost the exact same language with you. Robert was taking notes furiously, occasionally stopping to ask clarifying questions. Lisa, would you be willing to provide an affidavit documenting these patterns? And potentially testify if this case goes to trial? Lisa was quiet for a long moment, staring into her untouched coffee. If I do this, they'll destroy me. Blackwood has connections throughout the industry. He could make sure I never work in HR again. They'll destroy you anyway, Emily said gently. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually. Bullies. Don't stop until someone makes them stop. And right now, you're the only person with the evidence to expose what they're really doing. I need some time to think, Lisa said, but Emily could see the resolve building in her eyes. After Lisa left, Emily and Robert remained at the table, spreading out the evidence like pieces of a complex puzzle. The digital forensics that Michael had uncovered, combined with Lisa's documentation, painted a picture of systematic discrimination that went far beyond Emily's individual case. This is a class action lawsuit waiting to happen, Robert said, his excitement barely contained. We're not just talking about pregnancy discrimination anymore. We're talking about a pattern of gender-based harassment and retaliation that spans years. Emily's phone buzzed with a text from Michael. Emergency. Catherine Walsh called. She wants to meet with you tomorrow about the Morrison Industries contract. They're asking questions about why you're no longer on the account. Emily showed the message to Robert, who whistled low. Your client contact is asking questions. That's either very good news or very dangerous, depending on how your company responds. Catherine mentored me 2 years ago, Emily explained. She's sharp, ethical, and she doesn't tolerate corporate games. If she's sniffing around, It means she's noticed something off about my sudden disappearance from the project. Then we need to move fast, Robert said, gathering the documents. I'll file the EEOC complaint tomorrow morning. Once that's on record, they can't retaliate against you without making things infinitely worse for themselves. As Emily drove home through Seattle's evening traffic, she felt a strange mix of terror and exhilaration. The evidence they'd compiled was devastating, the pattern of discrimination undeniable. But she was also about to declare war on a company, with deep pockets and expensive lawyers, risking not just her current job, but her entire career. Her phone rang as she pulled into her driveway. It was her mother, calling from Ohio with the uncanny timing that mothers seem to possess. Emily, sweetheart, how are you feeling? You sounded stressed when we talked last week. Emily sat in her car for a moment, watching Michael through the kitchen window as he prepared dinner, his movements efficient and comforting in their familiarity. Mom, I need to tell you something, and I need to ask you about something you went through 30 years ago. What is it, honey? I'm fighting them, Mom. The company tried to force me out because of the pregnancy, but I'm not going quietly. I found a lawyer, I have evidence, and I'm going to make them pay for what they've done. Dorothy's silence stretched for several heartbeats. When she finally spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. I'm proud of you, Emily. Prouder than I can say. When I faced discrimination, I didn't have the laws you have, didn't have the evidence you've gathered. I just put my head down and endured it because I thought I had no choice. What would you have done differently? Exactly what you're doing now. Fighting back, standing up, refusing to let them win. You're not just fighting for yourself, sweetheart. You're fighting for every woman who comes after you. As Emily finally walked into her house, into Michael's waiting arms, she felt the weight of that responsibility settling on her shoulders. Tomorrow, she would file the complaint that would transform her personal nightmare into a public battle. Tomorrow, the real fight would begin. But tonight, surrounded by evidence of corporate wrongdoing and supported by allies who believed in justice, Emily Harper felt ready for war. The EEOC office in Seattle occupied a nondescript federal building on 2nd Avenue, its beige walls and fluorescent lighting designed to project bureaucratic efficiency rather than inspire confidence. Emily sat in the waiting area at 9:02 a.m., sharp, clutching a manila envelope containing 67 pages of documented discrimination that would transform her personal nightmare into a federal case. Robert Anderson emerged from the filing office with a receipt stamped in official red ink, his expression a mixture of satisfaction and grim determination. It's done, he said quietly. Formal complaints filed with both the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission and the Washington State Human Rights Commission. As of this moment, you're officially a federal whistleblower. Emily stared at the receipt, feeling the weight of what she'd just set in motion. How long before my company finds out? They'll be notified within 48 hours, Robert explained as they walked toward the elevator. Federal law requires them to be informed when a discrimination complaint is filed. That's when things get interesting and potentially dangerous. By noon, news of the filing had begun rippling through Seattle's tight-knit business community like shockwaves from an earthquake. Emily's phone buzzed incessantly with messages from colleagues, some supportive, others carefully neutral, a few conspicuously absent. The first call came from Catherine Walsh at 12:47 p.m. Emily. Catherine's voice was crisp, professional, but Emily could hear an undercurrent of concern. I need to see you today. There are some questions about the Morrison Industries account that require immediate clarification. They met at a small cafe near Pike Place Market, far from the corporate towers where both their careers had been built. Catherine arrived first, choosing a corner table with clear sightlines to the entrance, the strategic positioning of someone accustomed to corporate warfare. I heard about the EEOC filing, Catherine said without preamble as Emily sat down. Word travels fast in our industry. Emily felt her chest tighten. I can explain. You don't need to explain anything to me, Catherine interrupted, her voice sharp with anger. I need to explain something to you. 3 days ago, your company informed Morrison Industries that you were being transitioned to other priorities and would no longer be handling our account. No warning, no consultation with us about continuity, no explanation for why their star performer was suddenly unavailable. They told you I was transitioned? That's corporate speak for fired, Emily. And when I pressed Jennifer Martinez for details, she gave me some nonsense about evolving role requirements and strategic realignment. It was obvious bullshit, but I didn't understand why until this morning. Catherine leaned forward, her eyes blazing with the righteous fury Emily remembered from their first meeting. How long have you been pregnant? About 10 weeks. And they forced you out because of it. It wasn't a question. Catherine's statement carried the weight of someone who'd spent decades navigating corporate discrimination herself. I have documentation, Emily said quietly. Email chains, recorded conversations, a pattern going back years. They're not just targeting me. This is systematic. Catherine sat back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. Morrison Industries has a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination. It's written into every contract we sign, every vendor relationship we establish. If we can prove your company violated those terms, what does that mean? It means they've potentially breached a $12 million contract, and it means I have grounds to terminate that contract immediately. Emily felt a surge of vindication so powerful it left her breathless. You'd do that? Emily, too. Years ago, you saved Morrison Industries $3 million through your operational analysis. You identified inefficiencies our own people had missed, proposed solutions that exceeded every expectation. You're not just another account manager to us. You're the reason we trusted your company in the first place. Meanwhile, across town, in the corporate offices Emily had once called home, crisis meetings were erupting like wildfires. Richard Blackwood paced the executive conference room, his usual composure shattered by the legal papers that had arrived via certified mail an hour earlier. This is a disaster, he snarled at Jennifer Martinez, who sat at the head of the table looking pale and shaken. The filing mentions specific emails, recorded conversations, documentation going back 2 years. How the hell did they get access? To internal communications? Jennifer's hands trembled slightly as she flipped through the complaint. The detail here is extraordinary. They have our correspondence with legal counsel, internal strategy discussions, even quotes from private meetings. We have a leak somewhere in the organization. Or we have a spy, Blackwood said grimly. Someone with access to HR files and email systems. I want every employee who had contact with Harper investigated. Phone records, computer access logs, email traffic, everything. Brian Taylor cleared his throat nervously from his position at the far end of the table. This was the first time he'd been forced to confront his role in Emily's situation directly, and the guilt was written across his face in deep lines of stress and exhaustion. Maybe we should consider settling, he suggested tentatively. Cut our losses before this gets any worse. Blackwood turned on him with vicious intensity. Settle? Brian, if we settle this complaint, it's an admission of guilt. Every female employee we've ever disciplined, every pregnancy-related decision we've made becomes a potential lawsuit. We'll be sued into bankruptcy. Then what do you suggest? We fight. We discredit Harper's claims, challenge her evidence, question her motives. Pregnant women are emotional, unstable. We frame this as a vindictive response to legitimate business decisions. Jennifer finally spoke, her voice strained. Richard, I'm getting calls from board members, from our legal team, from major clients. Morrison Industries is asking pointed questions about our employment practices. This is becoming a public relations nightmare. Which is exactly what Harper and her ambulance-chasing lawyer want, Blackwood replied. They're hoping to pressure us into a quick settlement through media attention and client pressure. We can't let them win. By evening, Emily's phone was buzzing with calls from reporters who had somehow obtained copies of the EEOC filing. Business journalists, employment law specialists, even a producer from a local television news program, all seeking comment on what one called a bombshell discrimination case that could reshape corporate accountability. Emily declined all interviews on Robert's advice, but she couldn't help feeling a surge of satisfaction as she watched the evening news coverage. The anchor's lead story focused on allegations of systematic pregnancy discrimination at a major Seattle consulting firm, with legal experts explaining the potential implications for workplace equality. The most important call came at 8:30 p.m. from a number she didn't recognize. Ms. Harper? This is Rebecca Chen. You probably don't remember me, but I used to work at your company. I left 2 years ago after. She paused. After they made it clear that having a baby wasn't compatible with my career advancement. Emily's heart raced. Rebecca, I remember you. You were brilliant with financial modeling. I've been following your case through industry contacts. I want to help. I kept documentation from my time there, performance reviews, emails, meeting notes, and I know other women who went through similar experiences. How many others? At least 6 that I'm aware of. Maybe more. We've been talking among ourselves since news of your filing broke. We want to join your case, Emily. We want to fight back. As Emily hung up the phone, she realized that what had started as her personal battle for justice had become something much larger. The EEOC filing had lit a fuse that was now burning through Seattle's corporate community, exposing patterns of discrimination that had been hidden for years. Her company's carefully constructed facade of respectability was crumbling, and they were about to discover that the cost of systematic discrimination was far higher than they'd ever imagined. The real war was just beginning, and Emily was no longer fighting alone. Catherine Walsh's corner office on the 32nd floor of Morrison Industries commanded a sweeping view of Puget Sound, but her attention was focused entirely on the stack of documents spread across her mahogany desk. 3 days had passed since her meeting with Emily, and those 72 hours had transformed Catherine from concerned client to determined investigator. Pull every file we have on Strategic Solutions Group, she instructed her assistant Marcus, who stood in the doorway with a tablet in hand. Contract negotiations, performance evaluations, correspondence dating back 3 years. I want to understand exactly who we've been doing business with. The files painted a disturbing picture. Emily Harper's name appeared consistently throughout. Morrison Industries documentation as the primary point of contact, the strategic mind behind their most successful operational improvements, the account manager whose insights had saved them millions. Yet somehow, this crucial relationship had been severed without warning or explanation. Catherine picked up her phone and dialed a number she'd memorized years ago. Tom, it's Catherine Walsh. I need a favor. Can you run a quiet background check on Strategic Solutions Group's employment practices? I'm particularly interested in any patterns of discrimination or employee relations issues. Thomas Bradley had been Catherine's mentor when she'd started her career 20 years ago and now served as a senior partner at Seattle's most prestigious investigative firm. His voice carried the weight of someone who'd seen every variety of corporate malfeasance. How quiet are we talking, Kat? Invisible. If word gets back to them that Morrison Industries is investigating, it could compromise both our contract and an ongoing legal matter. Give me 48 hours. While Catherine orchestrated her investigation from the corporate heights, Daniel Mitchell sat in his cluttered newsroom cubicle at the Seattle Business Journal, chasing down sources and cross-referencing public records. The EEOC filing had crossed his desk through legal contacts, and something about the meticulous documentation had caught his attention. At 35, Daniel had built his reputation by exposing corporate corruption that other reporters Mr. Ignored. He'd learned that the most devastating stories often hid behind carefully crafted corporate communications and legal euphemisms. The Strategic Solutions Group case had all the hallmarks of systematic wrongdoing wrapped in business necessity. His first call was to Robert Anderson, who politely declined to comment beyond confirming that a complaint had been filed. His second call was to Rebecca Chen, the former Strategic Solutions employee who'd contacted Emily. "I can't give you details about ongoing legal proceedings," Rebecca said carefully when Daniel reached her at her new job. "But I can tell you that my experience at Strategic Solutions opened my eyes to how sophisticated workplace discrimination can be in the 21st century." "What do you mean by sophisticated?" "They don't call you into an office and say, 'We're firing you because you're pregnant.' They restructure your role for operational efficiency. They question your commitment during performance reviews. They exclude you from client meetings because travel might be difficult in your condition. Death by 1,000 paper cuts, all documented as legitimate business decisions." Daniel's next call was to Margaret Foster, an employment law professor at the University of Washington, who specialized in pregnancy discrimination cases. Her assessment was sobering. "What you're describing represents evolution in discriminatory practices," Margaret explained. "Companies have learned to avoid overtly illegal behavior while achieving the same discriminatory outcomes through sophisticated HR policies and careful documentation." How common is this pattern? More common than most people realize. For every case that makes it to federal court, there are dozens where women simply accept demotions or quiet terminations rather than fight back. The legal process is expensive, emotionally draining, and can destroy careers even when plaintiffs win. Back at Morrison Industries, Catherine's investigation was yielding troubling results. Thomas Bradley's preliminary report confirmed her worst suspicions. Strategic Solutions Group had settled at least 3 employment discrimination cases in the past 5 years, all involving female employees who'd experienced career transitions following pregnancies or family-related decisions. "The pattern is consistent," Thomas explained during their confidential meeting in Catherine's office. "High-performing women suddenly find their roles restructured, their responsibilities diminished, their advancement opportunities eliminated. Most settle quietly with non-disclosure agreements that prevent them from discussing their experiences." Catherine felt a familiar rage building, the same fury that had driven her to excel in a male-dominated industry, to fight for every promotion, to refuse the limitations others tried to impose. "Emily Harper saved us $3 million with her operational analysis. She identified inefficiencies our own people missed, and they tried to destroy her career because she's pregnant." "There's more," Thomas continued. "I've been tracking their client relationships, and Morrison Industries isn't the only major account asking questions. Boeing's procurement division has been inquiring about employee relations issues. Amazon's vendor compliance team requested documentation of their equal employment practices." The implications were staggering. If Morrison Industries could prove that Strategic Solutions Group had violated anti-discrimination clauses in their contract, they could terminate the $12 million agreement immediately and potentially sue for damages. Meanwhile, Daniel, Mitchell's investigation was expanding beyond individual cases to examine industry-wide patterns. His conversation with Dr. Sarah Williams, a researcher who'd spent 10 years studying workplace discrimination in professional services, provided crucial context. Seattle's tech and consulting sectors have some of the worst pregnancy discrimination rates in the country, Dr. Williams explained. The culture of long hours, constant travel, and total professional commitment creates environments where pregnancy is viewed as incompatible with success. How do companies get away with it? Legal sophistication and economic pressure. Most discrimination never gets reported because women can't afford to fight multinational corporations with teams of expensive lawyers. Those who do fight often find their careers effectively ended, regardless of whether they win or lose. Daniel's article was taking shape, not just the story of Emily Harper's case, but an examination of systematic discrimination hiding behind corporate policies and business justifications. He'd found documentation of similar patterns at 6 major Seattle firms, all using variations of the same strategies Strategic Solutions Group had employed. The most damning evidence came from an anonymous source within Strategic Solutions Group itself, someone with access to internal communications who'd provided Daniel with emails dating back 2 years. The messages revealed a coordinated effort to identify and marginalize female employees who might become family-focused and therefore less committed to client service. One email from Richard Blackwood to department heads was particularly revealing, "We need to be proactive about identifying potential maternity risks before they impact client relationships. Early intervention and strategic repositioning can minimize disruption while protecting the company from discrimination claims." As Daniel prepared to publish his exposé, Catherine Walsh was finalizing her own course of action. Morrison Industries. Legal team had confirmed that Strategic Solutions Group's treatment of Emily Harper constituted a material breach of their contract's anti-discrimination provisions. "We have grounds for immediate termination," Morrison Industries' general counsel advised during an emergency board meeting. "The contract specifically prohibits discrimination against employees working on our account. Their removal of Harper, without cause, violates those terms." Catherine looked around the boardroom at the 8 executives who would determine Strategic Solutions Group's fate. "Gentlemen, ladies, we're not just talking about a contract violation. We're talking about our integrity as a company. Do we continue doing business with an organization that systematically discriminates against the very people who make them successful?" The vote was unanimous. Morrison Industries would terminate their contract with Strategic Solutions Group, effective immediately, citing material breach of anti-discrimination provisions. The $12 million deal that had represented Emily's greatest professional triumph would become the weapon that destroyed those who'd tried to destroy her. As news of Morrison Industries' decision began circulating through Seattle's business community, Strategic Solutions Group faced the realization that their discrimination hadn't just been morally wrong, it had been catastrophically expensive. The fight Emily Harper had started was about to cost them everything. The Seattle Business Journal's digital edition went live at 5 a.m., but within 30 minutes, Daniel Mitchell's exposé, "Behind Closed Doors, The Cost of Pregnancy in Corporate America," was trending across every major social media platform. Emily read the headline on her phone while sitting in her car outside Strategic Solutions Group's offices, preparing for what she knew would be her most challenging day yet. The article was devastating in its precision. Daniel had woven together Emily's case with broader industry patterns, creating an undeniable narrative of systematic discrimination. The most damning section featured a leaked email from Richard Blackwood that read, "We must be strategic about managing family-focused employees before they impact client confidence and team dynamics." By 8:00 a.m., Strategic Solutions Group's phones were ringing incessantly. Local news stations requesting interviews, clients demanding explanations, employment lawyers fielding calls from potential whistleblowers. The company's carefully maintained reputation was disintegrating in real time. Emily's phone buzzed with an urgent text from Catherine Walsh. "Emergency meeting. Morrison Industries board convening at 10 a.m. to discuss immediate action. Need to speak with you first." The coffee shop where they met was nearly empty, the morning rush having cleared out before the business world fully absorbed the implications of Daniel's article. Catherine's expression was grim as she slid a folder across the table to Emily. "Morrison Industries spent the weekend reviewing our entire relationship with Strategic Solutions Group," Catherine said without preamble. "What we found goes beyond discrimination. It's systematic deception about their corporate practices." Emily opened the folder to find email chains, contract amendments, and performance evaluations that painted a disturbing picture. Strategic Solutions Group had consistently presented Emily as their lead strategist in client presentations, used her work to win new business, and built their reputation partially on her innovations, all while planning to remove her from the YI account. They've been using your work to secure contracts while simultaneously plotting to eliminate you, Catherine continued, her voice tight with controlled anger. That's not just discrimination, it's fraud. What does Morrison Industries plan to do? Catherine's smile was sharp, predatory. We're terminating the contract. $12 million gone, and we're filing a breach of contract lawsuit for misrepresentation. They told us Emily Harper would be leading this implementation, and now they're claiming she's not qualified for the role she's been performing brilliantly for months. Across town, Strategic Solutions Group's executive conference room had become a crisis command center. Jennifer Martinez stood before a wall of monitors displaying cascading social media mentions, each one another blow to the company's reputation. The article had been shared over 5,000 times in 3 hours, with commentary ranging from outrage to corporate executives publicly distancing themselves from Strategic Solutions Group's practices. Richard Blackwood paced the room like a caged animal, his usual corporate composure completely shattered. "This is orchestrated character assassination," he shouted at the assembled executives. "Harper's lawyer fed that journalist selective information to make us look like monsters." "Richard," Jennifer said quietly, her exhaustion evident. "The emails Daniel Mitchell quoted are real. The policies he described are accurate. We can't claim this is character assassination when it's based on our own internal communications." Brian Taylor, who had spent the weekend in sleepless agony about his role in Emily's treatment, finally found his voice. "We need to face reality. 3 major clients called this morning asking about our employment practices. Boeing's ethics committee wants a meeting. The Seattle Chamber of Commerce is investigating our membership status. Then we fight back." Blackwood's desperation was becoming evident. "We hire crisis management consultants. We challenge the accuracy of the reporting. We frame this as a disgruntled employee working with activist journalists." "Richard, stop." Jennifer's voice cut through his rant with surgical precision. The room fell silent. Jennifer Martinez had built Strategic Solutions Group through 15 years of careful relationship building and strategic thinking, but the woman standing before her executives now carried the weight of moral reckoning that transcended corporate damage control. "I spent last night reviewing every female employee's file from the past 5 years, Jennifer continued. "The pattern is undeniable. We've pushed out 12 high-performing women after they announced pregnancies or expressed family priorities. 12. How did I let this happen?" "You let it happen because it was profitable," Brian said quietly, his guilt finally overcoming his fear. "Emily Harper generated $3 million in client savings last year alone. Rebecca Chen designed our most successful operational framework. Sarah Nakamura created the retention system that boosted our revenue 15%. And we marginalized all of them because they chose to have families." At 10 a.m. sharp, Emily's phone rang with the call she'd been expecting. Catherine Walsh's voice was formal, official. "Emily, I'm calling to inform you that Morrison Industries has voted unanimously to terminate our contract with Strategic Solutions Group effective immediately. We're also filing suit for breach of contract and misrepresentation." "Catherine, I never wanted this to hurt your business relationship." "Hurt our relationship?" Catherine's laugh was harsh. "Emily, they've been lying to us for months, presenting you as their lead strategist while planning to fire you for being pregnant, using your work to win our confidence while treating you as expendable. This isn't about pregnancy discrimination anymore. This is about fundamental business fraud." The ripple effects were immediate and devastating. By noon, Strategic Solutions Group's stock price had dropped 18%. Amazon's vendor compliance division scheduled an emergency review. 3 board members submitted resignations. Employment lawyers across Seattle were fielding calls from current and former employees, each describing similar patterns of discrimination and retaliation. The most dramatic moment came during the 2 p.m. emergency board meeting. Richard Blackwood, cornered and desperate, made one final attempt to save himself. "If you scapegoat me for this," he declared to the assembled board members, "I'll expose every decision that was made at the executive level. I'll show how Jennifer approved these policies, how Brian participated in the discrimination, how this entire company built its culture around excluding women who wouldn't sacrifice family for profit." The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Board Chairman William Harrison spoke with the authority of 40 years in corporate leadership. "Richard, you seem to be under the impression that threatening to expose more discrimination will somehow help your position. Let me clarify something. If there's more wrongdoing to uncover, we want it exposed now, before it destroys what's left of this company." Harrison slid a document across the table. "Your resignation letter is already prepared. You can sign it and leave with dignity, or we can terminate you for cause and let the investigators sort out your personal liability. Choose." As news of Blackwood's forced resignation spread through Seattle's business community, Emily sat in Robert Anderson's office reviewing the latest developments. The young lawyer could barely contain his excitement as he outlined the implications. "This has become bigger than a discrimination case," Robert explained. "Morrison Industries' fraud allegations open up potential criminal charges. The pattern of systematic discrimination could trigger federal RICO investigations. We're not just talking about employment law anymore. We're talking about corporate racketeering." Emily felt overwhelmed by the scope of what her individual fight had unleashed. "I just wanted to keep my job and have my baby. I never intended to destroy an entire company." "You didn't destroy them," Robert said firmly. "They destroyed themselves through years of illegal discrimination. You just had the courage to expose it." That evening, Emily sat in her living room watching the local news coverage with Michael. The lead story featured Strategic Solutions Group's crisis, complete with expert commentary about the broader implications for workplace equality and corporate accountability. "3 months ago, I thought I had everything figured out," Emily said softly. "Career on track, pregnancy planned, future secure. Now I'm the face of a discrimination scandal that's destroying my former employer and changing how Seattle businesses operate." Michael pulled her closer on the couch, his hand resting protectively on her stomach where their daughter was growing. "You didn't start this fight, Em, but you finished it. And because of your courage, the next woman who faces pregnancy discrimination will have legal precedents, industry awareness, and proof that fighting back can actually work." As Emily drifted off to sleep that night, she reflected on how completely her world had changed. The company that had tried to silence her was crumbling under the weight of its own discrimination. The industry that had once seemed impenetrable was now scrambling to reform its practices. And she was no longer a victim, seeking justice. She was a catalyst for systemic change that would outlast any individual case or career. The reckoning was complete, but Emily's real work was just beginning. 1 week after Richard Blackwood's resignation, Strategic Solutions Group's boardroom felt like a mausoleum. The emergency session had been called to address what board chairman William Harrison grimly termed an existential crisis. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Seattle's business district hummed with its usual energy. But inside this room, the atmosphere was thick with the weight of impending corporate death. "The damage assessment is catastrophic," reported Chief Financial Officer David Park, his voice hollow as he read from a tablet that seemed to grow heavier with each number. "Morrison Industries, 12 million terminated. Boeing, 8 million under review. Amazon, vendor status revoked. Microsoft, compliance investigation initiated. We're looking at 43 million in lost contracts, with more cancellations expected." Jennifer Martinez sat at the head of the table, her carefully constructed executive persona finally cracking after days of crisis management. The company she'd built from a small consulting firm into a regional powerhouse was hemorrhaging clients, talent, and credibility at a rate that made bankruptcy seem inevitable rather than possible. "The legal exposure is equally devastating," continued General Counsel Sarah Kim. 7 additional discrimination complaints filed this week. Class action status granted yesterday. Potential damages now estimated between $50 and $80 million. Our insurance carriers are already disputing coverage for intentional discrimination. Harrison's weathered face showed every one of his 73 years as he surveyed the wreckage. What are our options? Settlement negotiations, Kim replied. Emily Harper's attorney has indicated willingness to discuss comprehensive resolution. But their demands are extensive. Across town, Emily sat in Robert Anderson's law office reviewing the latest offer from Strategic Solutions Group's desperate legal team. The settlement proposal was 57 pages of legal language that essentially amounted to corporate capitulation disguised as negotiation. They're offering everything, Robert said, barely able to contain his amazement. Full reinstatement at senior partner level, 7-figure damages, guaranteed promotion track, comprehensive policy overhaul, independent oversight, and compensation for all identified victims of their discrimination. Emily stared at the document, feeling the weight of what her individual fight had accomplished. What's the catch? Non-disclosure agreement. They want this settled quietly, with all parties agreeing never to discuss the specific details. Publicly. Standard practice, but it means no public trial, no continued media coverage, no additional deterrent effect for other companies. So they pay money and the story disappears. That's how most corporate discrimination cases end. The company writes a check, implements some policy changes, and continues operating with minimal public accountability. It's imperfect justice, but it's still justice. Emily's phone buzzed with a text from Catherine Walsh. Morrison Industries board meeting at 2 p.m. We need to discuss the fraud allegations before finalizing our lawsuit. Can you attend? The Morrison Industries boardroom commanded a panoramic view of Elliott Bay, its mahogany table scarred with decades of high-stakes decision-making. Catherine Walsh sat at the head, flanked by 8 executives whose collective authority represented billions in economic influence. Emily, Catherine began as soon as she entered, we've uncovered additional evidence of Strategic Solutions Group's deceptive practices. They used your strategic analysis to win our contract, then planned to remove you from the account before implementation even began. It's systematic fraud. Emily reviewed the documents Catherine provided, emails showing how Strategic Solutions Group had leveraged her reputation and client relationships to secure business while simultaneously plotting her removal. The evidence was damning not just morally, but legally. Morrison Industries wants to support your case beyond just terminating our contract, Catherine continued. We're prepared to testify about their fraudulent representations, provide documentation of their deceptive practices, and pursue criminal fraud charges if necessary. What does that mean for the settlement? It means you have leverage they never anticipated. They're not just facing employment discrimination anymore. They're facing potential criminal prosecution for business fraud. The settlement negotiations just became much more complicated. That evening, Emily sat at her kitchen table with Michael, surrounded by legal documents that represented the complete dismantling of her former employer. At 16 weeks pregnant, she was finally showing, her expanding waistline a constant reminder of why this fight had started and what she was fighting to protect. They're offering us financial security for life, she said, gesturing at the settlement papers. 7 figures in damages, guaranteed partnership, policy changes that will protect other women. Everything we originally wanted. Michael studied her face carefully. But accepting the settlement means Strategic Solutions Group gets to quietly rebuild without real accountability. The non-disclosure agreement means other women won't know about the systematic discrimination. Future victims won't have precedent to reference. You've already accomplished more than anyone could have expected. You've exposed the discrimination, forced industry-wide conversations about pregnancy bias, given other women the courage to speak up. You don't have to sacrifice your family's future to prove additional points. Emily's mother called at 8:30 p.m., her timing impeccable as always. "How are you holding up, sweetheart?" "I'm tired, Mom. Tired of being the face of workplace discrimination. Tired of carrying everyone else's expectations about what justice should look like. Tired of having my pregnancy used as a symbol in other people's fights." Dorothy's voice carried the wisdom of someone who'd fought her own battles against gender discrimination 30 years earlier. "Emily, you've already won. The question now is whether you're fighting for progress or for punishment. What's the difference?" Progress means creating change that protects future women. Punishment means destroying the people who hurt you. The settlement gives you progress, policy changes, financial compensation, industry awareness. A trial might give you punishment, but at what personal cost? What would you do? Exactly what you're going to do. Make the decision that's best for your family and your future, not the decision that satisfies other people's sense of justice. After hanging up, Emily walked into the nursery Michael had started preparing. Soft yellow walls, a crib they'd assembled together, books about raising strong daughters. This room represented everything she'd been fighting to protect, the right to be both a successful professional and a devoted mother. "I think I want to take the settlement," she said, when Michael joined her. "Are you sure?" Strategic Solutions Group is finished regardless. They've lost their biggest clients, their reputation is destroyed, and the industry knows what they did. Richard Blackwood's career is over. Jennifer Martinez will spend years rebuilding trust. The other victims are getting compensation. The policies are changing. But it's not perfect justice. Perfect justice doesn't exist, Emily said, her hand resting on her growing belly. But meaningful progress does. And I'd rather spend the next 6 months preparing to be a mother than fighting a public trial that might not accomplish anything additional. The next morning, Emily called Robert Anderson with her decision. The settlement would be finalized within 2 weeks, with comprehensive reforms implemented immediately and independent monitoring ensuring compliance. Strategic Solutions Group would survive, transformed and diminished, while Emily would emerge with the financial security and professional standing she'd always sought. It wasn't the dramatic courtroom victory that employment advocates wanted. It wasn't the public humiliation that would definitively deter other discriminatory employers. But it was victory enough for a woman who'd already sacrificed months of her pregnancy to fighting injustice and was ready to focus on building the future she'd always dreamed of. Brian Taylor's final act of redemption came that afternoon. A public statement taking responsibility for his role in Emily's discrimination and endorsing the policy changes the settlement would require. It was too little, too late for Emily's situation, but perhaps enough to help the next woman who faced similar challenges. The price of justice, Emily realized, wasn't just measured in legal victories or financial compensation. It was measured in the courage to fight when fighting was necessary and the wisdom to stop fighting when victory had been achieved. 6 months later, Emily Harper stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of her new corner office, her hand resting protectively on her 32-week belly as she watched Seattle's morning light dance across Elliott Bay. The nameplate on her door read Emily Harper, Senior Partner, a title she'd earned through battle rather than progression, but one that felt completely authentic now. Strategic Solutions Group had transformed beyond recognition. Lisa Thompson, now the Director of Human Resources, had implemented comprehensive anti-discrimination policies that served as an industry model. The Independent Ombudsman program Emily's settlement had mandated fielded regular calls from employees, who finally felt safe reporting concerns. The company survived, but as something fundamentally different, humbled, reformed, and genuinely committed to the equality they'd once only claimed to support. "The Catalyst consulting team is ready for your review," said Marcus, Emily's new assistant, as he placed a folder on her desk. Emily had insisted on keeping the Morrison Industries account, working closely with Catherine Walsh to expand their partnership beyond the original contract. Their success had generated 3 additional major clients, all specifically requesting Emily's leadership. The irony wasn't lost on her. Strategic Solutions Group was more profitable now than ever before. Their reputation rebuilt around the very principles they'd once violated. Emily's fight hadn't destroyed them. It had forced them to become what they'd always claimed to be. Her phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "Doctor's appointment went perfectly. Baby girl is measuring right on schedule. Can't wait to meet our little fighter." Emily smiled, remembering the ultrasound image tucked in her desk drawer. Their daughter would grow up in a different world than the one Emily had faced. Not perfect, but better. The pregnancy discrimination case that had nearly destroyed Emily's career had become a landmark settlement, referenced in employment law textbooks and cited in subsequent discrimination cases across the country. Emily? Catherine Walsh appeared. In her doorway, her expression warm but businesslike. "Ready for the Women's Leadership Conference presentation?" The Sheraton Grand Ballroom was packed with over 500 professional women, their faces reflecting every stage of career development from ambitious new graduates to seasoned executives. Emily took the stage with none of the nervousness she'd once felt, her authority now rooted in authentic experience rather than careful performance. 18 months ago, I thought I had to choose between career success and family, Emily began, her voice carrying easily through the room. I believed that excellence would protect me from discrimination, that being indispensable would guarantee fair treatment. I was wrong. She shared her story without the legal constraints that had once bound her. The settlement's non-disclosure agreement had expired, and Strategic Solutions Group had agreed to waive confidentiality in exchange for Emily's commitment to present their transformation as a positive example of corporate reform. "The reality is that workplace discrimination evolves," Emily continued. "It becomes sophisticated, wrapped in business justifications and corporate policies. But it's still discrimination, and it still requires us to fight back, not just for ourselves, but for the women who come after us." The questions that followed were pointed, personal, sometimes painful. Young women asked about balancing ambition with family planning. Executives shared their own experiences with subtle bias and systemic barriers. Mothers wondered how to re-enter careers after extended leaves. "The most important thing I learned," Emily concluded, "is that individual excellence isn't enough. We need systemic change, corporate accountability, and the courage to speak truth to power even when it's costly. But we also need to know when we've won, when to accept imperfect progress over perfect justice." After the presentation, Emily was approached by Dr. Rachel Martinez, a researcher studying workplace discrimination trends. "Your case created a ripple effect we're still measuring," she explained. "Pregnancy discrimination complaints increased 40% in the year following your settlement, not because discrimination got worse, but because women finally felt empowered to report it." That evening, Emily sat in the nursery she and Michael had completed, surrounded by soft colors and gentle lighting. The crib held a gift from Catherine Walsh, a small wooden plaque that read, "For the daughter of a woman who changed everything." Emily's reflection was interrupted by Michael's gentle knock. "How do you feel about the day?" "Proud," she said simply. "Tired, but proud. I spent so many months angry about what they tried to take from me. Now I'm focused on what we built." Instead, any regrets about the settlement? About not pushing for the trial? Emily considered the question seriously, as she had many times over the past months. No. The trial would have been about punishment. The settlement was about progress. Strategic Solutions Group had to change, other companies noticed and reformed their own practices, and women across the industry found their voices. That's victory enough. As her daughter kicked vigorously against her ribs, Emily smiled at the future she was creating. This child would grow up knowing that her mother had fought for her before she was even born, that workplace equality wasn't something to hope for but something to demand and protect. The breaking point that had once threatened to destroy Emily's career had instead become the foundation for everything she'd built since. Not just professional success, but the knowledge that she'd helped create a more equitable world for the next generation of working mothers. The fight was over, but the progress would continue long after Emily's story ended. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.